I feel like we weren't surprised just because we all we all know and think we're great, like great people and fun people to be around. So I think it's been really cool to see those opportunities.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Thursday, November 7th, and we have a lot to discuss. We're going to be going through in detail every NWSL quarterfinal. We're going to talk about who's got the advantage, how they're going to play, what we think tactically is going to happen, and maybe a couple upset watches, because what's the NWSL without a little bit of chaos? And then we're going to kick it over to a lovely conversation that I had with Olympic bronze medalist, USA rugby player Sammy Sullivan. So much to dig into. Let's get started. So before we get started, you're going to hear it from me. I'm sure you're hearing it from a lot of different content creators in the women's sports space, but obviously a very stressful, very difficult week if you live in the United States this week. And I'm going to say just like my little piece before we dive into some NWSL stuff, which is just, I've always felt when you are making content, when you are covering women's sports, when you are trying to find your voice in this space, I think you always just kind of have to lean into your basic principles. And one of the things that I've really held on to over the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years of doing this more and more is that I believe very, very strongly that even when it feels like the world has kind of stopped turning and the intersection of everything that it means to be working in women's sports or an athlete in women's sports is against you, I think that it's really grounding to keep focusing on these athletes and these teams and these general managers and these coaches and the people putting forward this product, because they don't have the luxury of the world getting to stop. They have very exciting games this weekend, next weekend, and the weekend after. And I think the only way to do right by those people as we cover them is to continue to cover them and not let the overwhelming feelings of the week get in the way of something that they should be very proud of. And I do think is very important, because I think the basis of coverage of women's sports is that all of this deserves thoughtful analysis and discussion on its own and does not have to stop just because we are struggling. So that was just my little piece on kind of moving forward this week, next week, the week after. These players deserve this spotlight. I want to continue to keep giving it to them. And the best way I know how is to focus on what they're doing on the field. So with that being said, NWSL quarterfinals are coming up this weekend. It's the first quarterfinal slate, full quarterfinal slate in NWSL history. 4 games. As people might know, they used to do the top 2 seed bye. I think that was a little bit less popular because there were some periods of icing. I think some teams felt less confident going into their semifinal after a week off. You saw teams get hot going through the quarterfinal round. They switch it up rather than, making different, like doing a wild card or anything like that. They just went full quarterfinal 1 through 8. So this is the largest NWSL slate or postseason slate that we've ever seen. I think we're going to see varying degrees of competition, but I am excited to have this full big weekend. I think sometimes quarterfinal rounds are the most fun because it feels like peak games, and then we are probably going to hone in on top performers in the semifinals and in the final. So we're going to go through each of these games. I'm going to give you the rundown on what I think about these different matchups, who I think has the advantage, and what we're going to be seeing this weekend, because it is going to be a very fun weekend of soccer. We're going to start with number 1, Orlando versus number 8, Chicago. Quick players to watch for the Orlando Pride. Barbara Banda, I think an obvious one MVP candidate. Their star striker, Emily Sams, who is the anchor of that defense, and obviously the GOAT, Marta. For Chicago, obviously you want to keep an eye on Mallory Swanson. She is Chicago's best player, and she's going to be the player they're going to be looking for in the attack 24/7. I do think you should also keep an eye on Ali Schlegel, who has been Swanson's kind of frontline partner a little bit more, especially with Ludmilla out, and Julia Grosso in the midfield for Chicago. The upset possibility here, I think that's always the question for NWSL teams, NWSL games. You want chaos, right? Upset possibility here is low, not only just because of how these teams have been playing, the momentum, the players they have available, the way Orlando has been playing versus the way Chicago has been playing. Upset possibility for this one, pretty low, in my opinion. Probably the widest gap in quality we're going to see all weekend. Typical for a number 1 versus number 8, right? This is actually probably why the NWSL has resisted this in the past. Orlando looks well rested coming out of the international break, had a nice win in the final regular season game after a little bit of a skid beforehand. Chicago has just been on a major skid. They were losing games before the international break. They lost their final game after the international break. I think maybe the only potential weakness, if we are on, quote unquote upset alert, is that Orlando's defense has been slightly more likely to concede in recent weeks, specifically since winning the Shield. But they had so much to give that statistically that doesn't bug me too much. They had been playing so well that maybe as they're treading water post Shield win, the fact that they're conceding more goals doesn't bug me too much. But interesting to see how that looks in their first playoff game. How do these teams play? What are people going to be able to expect between these two teams? Orlando likes to be aggressive in transition. They want to find Banda. They're comfortable in sort of a three back. This is going to be common. When I talk about maybe the higher ranked team or the more confident team going into these games, a lot of them like to operate out of a three back in the back line, which means they like to get numbers forward when they're possessing the ball. That implies not only confidence in your ability to avoid mistakes, but it also is an implementation of sort of your will over the game to overwhelm your opponent with numbers, progress the ball through their midfield with purpose to find players like Barbara Banda and score on the other end. Chicago, on the other hand, having lost some players, they lose Sam Staub to a season-ending injury mid-season during the Summer Cup. Like I said, they're going to be without Ludmilla, who is serving an extensive red card suspension. They've gone very negative tactically. They're going to try to disrupt Orlando first. They're going to sit off the ball, very low possession numbers all season for them, disrupt, and then try to find Swanson on the counter. But the difference in this game is I'm not even I'm not anti-negative in a single elimination scenario. You see it a lot in international football. You see it a lot in playoff soccer. You've seen teams become kind of off-ball mentality monsters and hold that defensive line and block shots and disrupt things and have that really work for them. But Chicago's execution on that just still also hasn't been particularly strong. I go back to that 2-0 loss against Gotham before the international break, where they hold on and they hold on and they hold on and they don't look particularly confident going forward. And then they finally concede 2 late goals to lose 2-0. They don't have enough counterattacking firepower to make other teams go more conservative. I do think Orlando is going to feel very confident putting numbers forward. And I think once Orlando probably strikes first, they're going to be able to conserve energy to hold on to a win. The Pride press is probably going to generate turnovers, and the Stars, right? Let's move into that. The Stars aren't going to be able to sufficiently probably block shots to stop the bleeding. So I think that this is an issue where maybe Chicago's weaknesses are Orlando's strengths, and I think that the Pride are going to have enough here to get through this quarterfinal relatively comfortably, 1-8. The next couple games are where things get a little bit more interesting, though. I think all 3 of these have upset potential of varying degrees. I don't know. It might be all chalk. We might see the top 4 seeds, as they have been doing throughout this season, just continue to dominate. But there are interesting things in all 3 of these games that could lead to different degrees of discomfort for the higher seed. I think players to watch for Washington versus Bay, for example, number 2 versus number 7. Washington players to watch, I think Trinity Rodman is an obvious one. Ashley Hatch has been picking up a lot of the attacking duties due to some injuries that the team has been dealing with. And then Hal Hirschfeld, not only an incredible rookie for the Washington Spirit, but after Andy Sullivan went down with a season-ending injury, Hirschfeld is incredibly important to that midfield, having to generate, she's like part of their turnover generation. She's part of that sturdy spine in front of the back line. Hirschfeld is going to be, if you want to maybe like see the keys to the game, that's the player to watch on your stream. For the Bay, Rachel Kundananji is an obvious one. Abby Dahlkemper as sort of a game changer for them in that back line once they made that key trade. And then Alyssa Mallinson, I think, as a fullback, we saw her play a little bit for the United States in the international break. She is the kind of player, she's more of a two-way player. In the counterattack, she can get involved and she can keep that width. So I think Mallinson, if maybe you pick like an attacker like Kudananji, a defender like Dahlkemper, Mallinson is going to be more of that kind of two-way player that can impact the game on both ends. The upset possibility here is like low yet tantalizing, perhaps. This is the perfect example of how I think single elimination can feel different than a season or a series. The Spirit are more disciplined than Bay. They're more consistent. Their style of play is more easy to replicate. But when Bay FC is good, they are so good. And so even if the Bay isn't always able to replicate those positive performances day in and day out, if they show up and they play their best game, this could go either way. How do these teams play? Washington is a wonderful counterattacking team with players like Rodman who can move into space and hit the ball in from wide. Again, you're seeing Hatch get a little bit more play, whether she's someone who's playing a little bit more hold up to open the wings up, or if she's a player that is on the end of some of that delivery. Like I said, Hirschfeld is going to be key to that process of processing turnovers. If they get the ball in the middle of the pitch, they move very, very quickly and they set your defense on notice. the spirit that's why they're one of the most fun teams to watch, is because when they do get the ball, it's always quick and is purposeful, and they have such exciting individual talent when they get numbers forward. Bay FC actually, interestingly, has kind of increasingly done the same. We talk a lot about the turnaround for Bay FC. They were a lot more methodical at the beginning of the season. They got caught playing out of the back a lot of defensive mistakes trying to reach the midfield when the midfield was under fire. And so they would get stuck not being able to even progress the ball to reach these really exciting forwards that they have. I mentioned Kudananji, but obviously Asa Oshwala is another player that they have there. Now they have gotten a lot faster in progressing the ball. They're not trying to be quite so play out the back minded, and that has generated a lot more in terms of results for them. They utilize the steadiness of that center back partnership that they have of Dahlkemper and Menges, and the speed of their forwards. So they've become a much more dangerous side over the course of the year. But here's the difference, is just kind of that comfort level, depth, comfort level, and versatility. For Bay, one of the downsides of when plan B becomes plan A, for example, plan A was, again, this more methodical playing out of the back, trying to implement some of these kind of high, level ideas that didn't work so well in their implementation for a team in their first year. Then they switch it and they make it a little bit simpler, and they utilize actually the talent that they have, and they do a good job of actually playing to their strengths. Now plan B has become plan A, which I think, again, in single elimination does cut down on your versatility. You have fewer tricks to pull out of your bag if you get caught out, or you make a mistake, or you have to chase this game. And counterattacking football is awesome unless you are chasing a game that you can't reach, right? And so Bay is more prone to mistakes away from home. I think Bay, for them, it's about execution, that like how well all of these games are, but there is a chance here, but the margin is very, very thin for them. So I'm still leaning towards Washington, but for all of these different reasons, I think that Bay could, at the very least, score first. And I think that would be a really interesting game to watch. Next, we have Gotham FC versus Portland. A game closer on paper, maybe, than in practice. I think no one really expected the Thorns to be in that 6th spot going into this season. Gotham players to watch, I think, are fairly obvious to anyone who follows this show. You've got Lynn Williams, Rose Lavelle, Emily Sonnet, Esther, Ella Stevens. They have so many players that can hurt you. Neely Martin. I mean, I did my ode to Neely Martin a couple weeks ago. For the Thorns, I think their impact players are going to be the attacking midfield and the attacking line. Smith, Sagita, Sinclair, Weaver, probably Moultrie underneath that. How do they get all of those players involved to turn this into a bit of a foot race? Because I think this game, especially, so let's move to upset possibility. I'm getting ahead of myself. Upset possibility, I think, is bigger on paper than in practice. It's an exciting matchup between two top clubs. No one thought Portland was going to be a major underdog here when the season started, and they're finally healthy. So with Portland, if you always look at their roster, I think you have to say a team like this always has a chance. You look at the construction of what they have in the front, and the leadership that they have in the back, and some of the talent they have in their midfield, you would say, yes, of course, you would never say that this team doesn't have a chance looking at what they're going to be putting out in their starting 11. But they're still so vulnerable in the back against a motivated opponent. We see what they're able to do when they're able to overwhelm. I think we saw that against Angel City in their regular season finale. But Gotham pounces on you on the other end, and they dedicate numbers to a full team press that I think the Thorns feel maybe uniquely unready to deal with. So I talked at the beginning of Chicago's weaknesses being Orlando's strengths. I think you might see that here, where Portland's weaknesses in playing out of the back and in sort of that comfort level on the wings in terms of their fullback situation. I just don't think their fullbacks are as strong as they have been in the past. And I think sometimes they have issues with pace and precision with their center back pairing. And then Gotham lives in the other team's defensive third. They want to generate turnovers in the attacking third. They want to place Portland's defense on their heels. And so I think this game is probably going to be played not so much in the middle third. Portland is probably going to try to play through their midfield, though obviously a player like Becky Sauerbrunn can hit a nice long ball when she needs to. They're going to be trying to find Sophia Smith, who is going to either turn to goal, run towards goal, or draw defenders to kind of open up Weaver or Sinclair or Sagita. And the Gotham defense is known for their high line. They play a little bit of a tightrope act, but they're very comfortable playing the offside trap. They're also, though, willing to keep their fullbacks home if they have to worry about individual attackers. We've seen them kind of get closer to man marking individual attackers at times. And so I think my hope in a competitive game here is that we're going to see Smith and company trying to unlock that Gotham high line, try to unlock that Gotham defense. Maybe if they have to go vertical, that's fine. get the ball into the feet of your attackers and see what they can do when they press numbers forward. And then you're going to see the same thing on the other end. You're going to see that Gotham front line, that Gotham midfield pushing to generate turnovers in their attacking third. Because I think if they have to think that if they can get that Portland defense on a quick turnover, that it's going to be curtains for that Thorns defense, which I do think is going to take some retooling in the offseason. So the difference is that stability on every line. Probably if you're picking defense versus defense, I would probably pick Gotham's over Portland's. Attacks, I actually think, are relatively equal in stature. Both of these attacks are very, very good. They're very focused at what they do. You have very good goal scorers and finishers, and you also have very good playmakers. But the other thing, though, is this is my final thought. When I say a team like Portland always has a chance, Gotham does have to be careful not to be too methodical. I'm curious if the Thorns are going to let Gotham see a little bit more of the ball. I think if Portland comes out and tries to play this straight up, again, with high turnover generation and with playing out of the back to try to reach their midfield, and they keep their spacing and they keep their entire their entire front line on that Gotham defense, I think they're going to lose. But I wonder if Portland plays a little bit more compact, they do more of a 4-2-3-1, they sit back a little bit and they force Gotham to be more methodical and force Gotham to try to find these things with the ball. You can't generate turnovers if you have the ball. And then try to play Gotham at their own game and get the ball quickly up to Smith. That's how I would play this, which is not exactly how Portland usually approaches the playoffs. They like to play games straight up because of who they are. But with the circumstances this year, I think Portland should come in a little bit more conservative and then take your chances on the other end because they do have the attacking firepower to get there. And then our number 4 versus number 5. This is on paper the closest game. We've got the Kansas City Current versus the North Carolina Courage. It's going to be in Kansas City, and that's a major point, which we'll talk about in just a second. Kansas City players to watch, I think obviously Temwa Chawinga, Vanessa DiBernardo, Michelle Cooper. I think actually she has been fabulous in the last couple of weeks. I think, actually you could say the entire Kansas City, like starting 11 for players to watch. They're so dynamic, but I've really enjoyed what we've seen from Michelle Cooper progressing through her, let's say, quote unquote, sophomore year in the league. Really, really nice steps forward into becoming more of a footballer than just maybe a really, really good athlete who is able to move very quickly. North Carolina, I think players to watch, obviously you see Ashley Sanchez, kind of she's the one tasked with unlocking other teams' defenses a lot, especially with how methodically North Carolina likes to play. I want to shout out Kaylee Kurtz, who is in the North Carolina defense. She's their Iron Woman year after year. She got a vote. She was not my number 1, but she got a vote for Defender of the Year from me. I think she's been fantastic, and so she's a player to watch. I think if the North Carolina defense holds, she is a player that is going to be responsible. And then Minaka Matsukubo, she is so talented. And again, I think it's going to take for North Carolina to have a shot in this game. It's going to take those moments of brilliance, and it's going to take staying very, very calm. Now, upset watch. Now, this one, I said last week or earlier this week that I just thought Kansas City looked so strong against Chicago in their regular season finale. The momentum's there. North Carolina just loses at home. The momentum is not there. However, I think we have to turn the upset possibility into Chawinga watch, 2K24, because Temwa Chawinga did not play in the regular season finale for Kansas City. She is day-to-day with a knee injury. It's fairly obvious that when she is on the pitch, that is exactly who the Current want to play through. She is a historically good goal scorer in the NWSL, MVP candidate, and she may not be available for this game. And that changes things for the Current. It just does. And we saw the way they were able to score by committee against Chicago, but we were talking about momentum. Chicago a little bit in shambles at the end of the season. This is the kind of curveball that can affect a single elimination game. So now for me, as hopeful for every team to be at their best, I'm hopeful that Chawinga will be available for at least a half in this game. It sounds the way that Vlatko Andonovski talked about her fitness. It sounded like it's not exactly like an either or. It's more just about how much can she handle in terms of loading. And the Courage will be prepared for either possibility because the Courage kind of play their own game no matter what. They don't tune their game quite as much to the other team. They're not going to be overly concerned, I think, with a player like Chawinga, though obviously they're going to have plans for that. And the Current have other goal scorers, but if they have to see this game through without their superstar, it's going to be harder. It's going to be harder to do. As I've mentioned before, the Courage are pretty compact. They don't really rely on long ball distribution. They're very different than a number of the other teams in this playoff. They prefer one-touch passing sequences. They love the Lions' share of possession. They're very methodical. They are nothing like the Courage teams of 2018, 2019, 2021. They are changing a lot. And so you want to see from this team basically the perfect execution of something that I think is kind of hard when you are trying to play playoff NWSL ball, which is building out slowly, holding on to the ball, taking your chances. They don't shoot a lot, and so they have to basically kind of get into those right perfect positions. They can do that. I think a concern for the Current is that kind of again, sort of methodical ball movement can sometimes lead to set pieces, and the Current are pretty vulnerable on set pieces. Like for the Courage, as much as they want to be able to get these shots on goal, they also probably are going to be trying to generate corner kicks. They're going to be trying to generate free kicks outside the box. That is something that the Current have struggled with this season. But I do think ultimately the way that maybe this is encapsulating it all is that I think the difference for this game is going to probably just be mistakes, or lack thereof. North Carolina, like I said, they're going to be looking for the right moment to pounce. They're going to try not to give too much up on the other end. I do think they are a uniquely tricky opponent for the Current because the Current loves space, and North Carolina is not going to give them any. And the North Carolina has the ability to not give the Current space while also not playing overly negatively because they just do that all the time. That's how North Carolina plays. But Kansas City just needs that one moment to push forward in numbers, right? There are going to be moments where North Carolina is exposed. There are going to be moments where they're dedicated, whether it is off a set piece. Kansas City is so threatening off of a set piece on their other end. You never know if they're going to concede or if they're going to make a run all the way to their opponent's goal, right? And I also do think that home field advantage, if it exists anywhere, it is in this game. North Carolina traditionally has not played as well away from home in this season, and Kansas City has been very, very good at home. So I do think Kansas City has an edge, but it's reliant on North Carolina opening things up and making a mistake. Because I do think if North Carolina plays this one perfectly with the goal attached, because that sometimes has been a problem for them, Kansas City could have trouble finding space, especially without Chewinga available. So now we're going to switch over to something a little bit different. I had a really lovely conversation earlier today with USA rugby player, Olympic bronze medalist Sammy Sullivan. We chatted about the Paris experience, coming home, sort of that push-pull of being an Olympic athlete, trying to seize the moment, and also what's next for women's rugby in the United States with a really important exhibition match coming up, an exhibition tournament coming up on November 17th in Portland. Lovely, lovely conversation. I had such a blast. I hope everyone enjoys. All right, we are here with Olympic bronze medalist, member of Team USA Rugby, Lego enthusiast, Sammy Sullivan. Sammy, maybe first question just to kick this off is, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. Still doing shoulder rehab post Olympics, so that's been good. Yeah, and just really enjoying post Olympic life and this kind of new push to the new season.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So, huge spotlight in Paris, capture the heart of a nation. You know, one of the best is like one of the best moments of the first week of the Olympics for me was you guys winning bronze. How has life changed, stayed the same after the spotlight of Paris? And what does it look like to go back to the day to day after something like that?
Yeah, I would say life has definitely changed a little bit. I would say a lot of us who did go to the Olympics, who were part of that team, um, have felt opportunities open up to us that otherwise we would have never gotten because there's so many eyes on women's rugby and rugby in general. So that's been amazing. And I know a lot of my teammates are capitalizing on those opportunities. But I will say, just in general, there is such a thing called Olympic blues that a lot of people go through, where you do get to this highest point in athletic achievement. You've been dreaming of it for your whole life, and then all of a sudden you kind of have to come back down to reality, kind of like you're talking about going back to everyday life. So I've definitely been experiencing a little bit of that as well, but just important to rely on your support system, and I've had a great support system pretty much before, during, and after the Olympics. So yeah, great opportunities, but definitely a bit of post Olympic blues as well.
I believe that. I mean, as you mentioned, you're rehabbing an injury, so that slows you down a little bit as well. But for you personally, is it helpful to just take a second to take a beat, take a break after an event like that? Or is it useful for you? I think athletes talk about maybe different mental strategies for this, to look to the next, to kind of be like, okay, what's happening next? What is the next part of the journey here?
Yeah, I think it was vital for me to kind of start looking ahead, and especially going through this I got shoulder surgery like a month after the Olympics. So that's kind of taken me out of the first couple of tournaments here coming up. But even just focusing on the day-to-day wins in rehab, like, yes, last week I got to pick up a 6-pound weight instead of a 5-pound weight. And I started running again. So just focusing on those little wins for me is what has been helpful. But definitely excited about even upcoming opportunities. Like, I'll get to coach during this Premier Rugby Sevens All Stars event with Kelly Griffin with the All Stars team. So that's definitely something to look forward to.
Incredible. Maybe taking a moment to stay in this sort of Paris experience for a little bit longer. Did you have a favorite moment of that? Was it, I mean, some people say that the moment is on the pitch when it's winning the Olympic bronze, winning something like that. Is it the experience in Paris with your teammates? What was the best part of the Olympics for you?
Oh man. I've been asked this question so much, and I feel like I answer something different every time.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have to say, yeah, just being with that group of women. Um, it There was something really special about our team going into Paris 2024. The culture that we had worked really hard to build, the connection we had worked really hard to build was unlike anything I'd experienced in team sports, and I've been doing team sports my whole life. So, those girls are my family, my best friends. And yeah, winning that high of an achievement together, like, such an intimate moment. And um yeah, it was amazing.
Well, it sounds like that, or seems to me that that is part of why everyone kind of fell in love with the team, right? It is obviously what you achieved on the field, and that was so incredible. But getting to follow your stories while you're in the Olympic Village, people are, they followed Alona on Dancing with the Stars afterwards. Has it been surreal to see your teammates and yourself have these opportunities to reach a wider audience like this?
Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh, the just speaking about Low, like, the way
Mm.
she's blown up has been absolutely incredible, but really not surprising at all, just knowing her personally and her personality, and um what she has to offer as a role model to so many young girls and women and athletes alike. So uh yeah, I would say I feel like we weren't surprised, just because we all we all know and think we're great, like, great people and fun people to be around. So I think it's been really cool to see those opportunities. I mean, Spiff, like, that was probably the coolest one, was seeing Spiff get the recognition she deserves as a player, because
Yep.
she's kind of just like a chronic non-believer in herself, like her hardest critic, and out of anyone on the team. And for her to get that historic Olympic moment for our team was incredible. And uh, yeah, I hope her cleats go in the Olympic Museum. I hope that clip gets replayed at every Olympics for the next 100 years. So um, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So talking about let's talk about what's next, right? So the Olympics happen. It's a huge moment for the team, for rugby in the United States. It's a huge hit. But then there is sort of always this question, and this is a women's sports podcast. We talk about this in women's sports all the time, which is you do get those spotlight moments and people do connect with athletes, and then they look at, how do I follow this athlete day in and day out? How do I see them compete in a league? How do we develop this sport in the country? And I've talked to a couple Olympic athletes this summer as well about feeling not only sort of a responsibility to keep the conversation moving, but there's a little bit of pressure to say, okay, we need to capitalize on this moment. And it seems like this game between USA Rugby and the Premier Rugby Sevens that's coming up at Providence Park on November 17th, really good opportunity for that. It's going to be a whole weekend with a lot of rugby programming at a lot of different levels. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how important it is to have events like this to showcase people not only the talent that you guys have, but also just to keep practicing, to keep talking about the Rugby Sevens, the league, and to keep USA Rugby pushing forward.
Yeah, yeah, it is kind of an unfortunate problem that a lot of Olympic athletes have to deal with, that it's our I guess I'd honestly say burden to have to compete at the highest level, be an elite athlete, but also at the same time constantly be promoting yourself and your sport. Um, and honestly, that can sometimes even become a second job. Like when you do look at people like Lowe, um, with their social media, and it's incredibly impressive, uh, the amount of time that people can put into being the best in their sport and also advertising their sport, which is basically what we have to do. Um, and it is important because that's how, when you get eyes on your sport, you have to maintain them, because that's how you do, move the dial forward and get more freedoms as a player, more stability as athletes. So yes, this upcoming event in Portland is going to be awesome. I think it's going to give the American people the chance to see on American soil like what we were able to do in Paris. It might not be all the same usual suspects, because obviously a lot of those
Right.
girls have moved on, but man, it is the amount of talent across America in rugby is so vast, and people just don't even realize it. So that'll be cool for people to understand, like, oh wait, it's not just those 14 girls that were in Paris. Like there's
Hmm.
so many amazing athletes, rugby athletes in America. So it's going to be really exciting. And Premier Rugby Sevens, the league is a great tool for people to see that pathway into the international program,
Hmm.
and ultimately, hopefully, will lead to even bigger and better opportunities for rugby athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe going back to that first part of the answer that you gave, talking about that balance of having to promote the sport while also playing it. How do you handle that? I think everyone's answer is a little bit differently. How do you handle that personally? How do you maintain that balance and even just maintain your mental health? Because as we know, when opportunities do come in, it's wonderful, but it can sometimes be a little bit of a double-edged sword where you say, this is pulling me out of my routine, this is out of my comfort zone, and you want to go back and just focus on what got you there, which is the athlete element of it.
Yeah, wow. That's a great question. I feel like I didn't focus on that at all going into Paris. And yeah, I would be like, I don't know if you remember Gibby from iCarly, but I would say
Uh-huh.
like to Lowe's Instagram, I'm like the Gibby of Lowe's Instagram. So that's just, I don't know. I've always been like pretty goofy when it comes to social media, but post Paris, I'm definitely more conscious of it. I have a much larger following, and
Mm-hmm.
there is like a certain pressure to post and say yes to everything, because you don't know if you're going to get that opportunity again. So I'll just be honest and say I've only been dealing with it for a couple months, and I haven't found a good answer for how
Yeah.
I deal with
Yeah.
burnout, because I'm just burning myself out. But
Yeah.
um, for right now, like I'm doing that because I see the value in it for my
Mhm.
sport, not only myself but my sport, like the girls that are going to come after me, and yeah, ultimately, hopefully, just encouraging more young people to play rugby. So yeah, hopefully I'll find a good routine in the future, but right now it's just yes, 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 yes.
I mean, that makes perfect sense, though. I mean, sometimes it is just the logical right thing to do. It's just like, this is the hard burn time and we go for it. And then there will be time to rest later, but it's just not right now. I totally understand that. And we are seeing, especially, we hope to always see again in women's sports and in Olympic sports, that sort of watershed moment where it does become more consistent, the programming becomes more consistent, so that the athletes don't have to carry the burden quite so much. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit as well. Michelle Kang's investment of $4 million over the next 4 years into USA Rugby. Michelle Kang, everybody who listens to this podcast knows her very well, owner of many different women's soccer teams. She's doing investment into women's sports science. This has become a huge project for her. But in terms of just the dollars and cents, for people who maybe have a sense of an Olympic athlete, you have the big moment, but then probably a lot of the things that you have to carry yourself in terms of resources to keep striving to go on to the next level. How important is investment like that from Michelle Kang?
Oh my gosh, extremely, extremely, extremely important. And for those who don't know, uh, the Olympic sports in America are not federally funded. And unless you have like great donors, or the USOPC is doing really well that year, like you're not getting paid for the you're not getting paid as much as you should be for the hours of work you're putting into training and your sport, and ultimately representing Team USA um, in 4 years time. So especially in these years, like right after the Olympics and next year, that is where you see the fall off of eyes on our sport. It's just going to happen. Like as much as we want to keep as many people watching as possible, it is, because some people aren't sports people except the Olympics. So
True.
um I would say, yeah, just for that alone, like for someone of Michelle Kang's caliber to come out and say, I see promise in this team and I'm willing to invest in this team, is beyond important, because that shows other people in her position, wow, if someone as amazing as this, like as business minded as this, is putting her dollars, like her money where her mouth is, basically, it that encourages other people to invest and ultimately, yeah, make our lives as athletes so much easier.
And it's so necessary, right, to keep the player pool growing, to especially, again, people were so excited about bronze, but there is this feeling of the US, especially in women's rugby, as this sort of emergent nation, right? The sky's the limit, but it does take investment to get there. Um, for speaking again, just kind of talking about USA Rugby coming together to do this Premier Rugby Sevens exhibition match. What does the programming look like? Again, talk about for people who don't understand necessarily the life of a USA Rugby athlete year round. How often does the team meet? How many tournaments do you guys do that are not maybe the big major international tournaments? How useful is coming together again for an event like this, even just to get new players in? We talk about this all the time on this podcast about like the soccer team or the basketball team and how to keep the health of the program. What does USA Rugby do kind of behind the scenes outside of these major tournaments to keep the player pool as healthy as possible?
Yeah, so USA Rugby is, I would say, very unique when it comes to Olympic sports, that we are in full-time residency. So we're
Mm,
full-time here in San Diego at the Chula Vista Elite Athlete Training Center. So we're not really having to deal with the problem of only coming in for 3-week camps
mhm,
leading up to big events that I know a lot of other programs have to deal with. But I would say our year pretty much fully consists of rugby most of the
mhm,
time. We don't get a lot of time off. We'll get time off in the summer. We got like a month off after the Olympics, which was
mhm.
great. But
Yeah.
for the most part, your summer, spring, fall, and winter are all filled up with rugby. We compete from November to May, sometimes even June, on the HSBC World Seven Series, our
Mhm,
international uh, competitive series league. And then summer is mostly PR7s. And then, of course, you have like World Cup sevens, Pan American Games, and then the Olympics. So
yep.
this coming summer is like the only summer we have off from a big international thing, which
Mm,
I'm sure will be filled up with awesome PR7s events. So, yeah, events like this, I would say, to a program that is a full-time residency that consists of the same, 20 to 23 people year round, is good to see fresh talent,
mhm.
and good to see, okay, how does my team really stack up against the best in America? And what do I need to change? Are there girls that I didn't look at? And this is me assuming what my head coach is doing. I don't actually
Of
know.
course, yes, of course, yeah.
Um,
You're just like kind of playing head coach for the second, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, but yeah, I think it's going to be a great tool. Especially, we have so many fresh new talent on our team in residency, have never played at the I don't know how to say it, adults international.
The senior
Yeah,
level,
the senior
yeah.
level, the
Yeah.
senior international level. So for them to get this opportunity to kind of have like a warm up before
Mhm.
kind of getting thrown into Dubai and
Yeah.
Cape Town
Yeah.
is huge.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything else in particular that you're excited about for the weekend in Portland, an amazing women's sports town?
Yeah, I got to hang out with some of the riveters the last time I
Yep.
was there, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the to get to hang out with them was awesome. Like to see people care so much about that NWSL team up there, the Thorns. It
The
was
Thorns. Yep.
really cool. So yeah, hopefully getting to hang out with some more riveters and converting them over to rugby fans.
Hell yeah.
Um, yeah, going to the sports bra. I did.
Mm-hmm.
I only had like a day there last time, so I definitely want to go to the sports bra while I'm out there. Um, and yeah, for me personally, getting the opportunity to kind of shadow Kelly Griffin, the All Star women's coach, is going to be really cool for me because that's the other plight of an athlete is you spend a lot of your um, young adult years playing sports, and then all of a sudden you don't play sports anymore. And it's kind of like, what do I do now? So kind of getting that opportunity to see is coaching a good avenue for me post my athletic career is going to be
100%.
really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And then maybe talking a little bit, I mean, this is the other thing that kind of people know about your story is people talk about the Lego sets, right?
Yes.
You talk about opportunities, the Lego, I love the Lego partnership every time you're showing off the new sets. As we do talk about sort of this taking a moment as you're rehabbing injury coming off of the Olympics, what are you working on right now? What's the Lego set that's caught your eye now?
Yeah. So current Lego set, Christmas wreath. I'm the type person November 1st hits, it's Christmas. So
Yep.
yeah, Lego Christmas wreath. But I definitely do I'm in a bit of a Lego rut right now
Okay.
because I've been traveling so much. I haven't gotten to really get into my favorite hobby, and I would describe myself as like an extroverted introvert. If you know
Mm.
me, i'm
Mm-hmm.
i'm Gibby from iCarly, but otherwise I want to like be at home and not talk to anyone or do anything. So yeah, the homebody in me is like so excited to eventually get time off and
Yeah.
just go ham on like the 20 Lego sets that are in my wish list right now. But yeah, for now, just kind of on that travel grind, and yeah, hopefully the next set coming up will be kind of a bigger set similar to Eiffel Tower level that I can
Yeah.
just put my headphones on and go to town on
No,
for like 10 hours.
I love that. I recently have been dealing with stress by doing a lot of puzzling. I love it. I think it's really nice to
Yes.
just sit down and work on something. It's really
100%.
nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
yesterday I started a puzzle. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
not looking at any of this anymore. Like, I can't do
Exactly.
this.
Yep.
Let me just do a
Oh
puzzle.
yeah.
So,
Did a whole 750 puzzle set like over the last 48 hours. I was like, we're sitting
yes.
down, we're doing it. We're working on a puzzle.
Yes,
Um
mental health break from
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
going
It's
on right
very
now.
important. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So maybe just one final big picture question to close this up. Talking about the perceptions of rugby. This is something that I actually close a lot of the interviews with because we're in a very interesting time for Olympic sports, I think, due to kind of greater access to see Olympic sports. And then also we're seeing this big wave with women's sports as well in the United States. Maybe it's a twofold question. One being that what has been the biggest change that you've seen in the perception of women's rugby, maybe in the last, let's say, 6 months, total, sort of the way the public has responded to it? And then what would you like to see going forward? What would growth look like to you for the sport of women's rugby?
I would say the biggest change I've seen is when me or one of my teammates does post something rugby related, like a rugby highlight or even just a picture, I feel like we were definitely more prone to get comments beforehand of like, oh well, if you tried to tackle a man, you'd get you'd get demolished, or like try to tackle me, see what happens. Just some of these just straight up misogynistic
Mm-hmm.
comments
Yep.
that I think more so now people are just actually learning to appreciate women's sports for the sake of women's sports and not pulling their hair out trying to compare it to the men's
Mm-hmm.
side of the sport. Like it's been so nice to get actually positive comments from men and women, and what I hope to see moving forward is there are still those comments out there of like people just not appreciating the sheer athleticism that women's rugby players demonstrate every time they get out on the field. And honestly, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. So it'd be great if we get like more positive comments and we get less, people trying to make a nonsensical point. But yeah, that's what I'd like to see moving forward.
Yeah, 1000%. Love that. Great final statement. Well, thank you so much, Sammy, for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Super cool. Thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome. And really excited about the Premier Rugby Sevens All-Star Tournament in Portland, November 17th, Portland, Oregon. So if you're in the area, please come out and see in person, because we do really need those eyes and that physical support. But if you can't come in person, be following on social media. And yeah, I hope to see a lot of you guys there.
100% cosign. This has been today's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. Shout out to producer extraordinaire Parker Fenton. Really excited about this NWSL postseason. We'll have more college basketball coming up. And obviously, I keep mentioning the WNBA offseason keeps rolling. So we've got plenty to talk about for the next couple of weeks. Very excited to keep it going. I hope everyone's staying safe out there. And we'll talk next week.